administration has made it a priority both to end lawfare and the weaponization of government, and also to hold those who have engaged in lawfare accountable. One of the law firms that has been involved in that is called Perkins Coie. That's also a law firm that has engaged in unlawful DEI practices. This executive order will suspend security.
And I've watched it take place.
This executive order will suspend security clearances and access to certain federal resources for that law firm, and also launch a holistic review of unlawful DEI practices at some of the nation's largest law firms.
This is an absolute honor to sign. What they've done is it's just terrible. It's weaponization. You could say weaponization against a political opponent, and it should never be allowed to happen again. And you're looking at about 15 different firms?
That or more, sir, yes.
Okay. Worse than CNN is MSDNC, which is the worst. And the good news is very few people watch them anymore. They have lost such credibility. And frankly, what Nicole Wallace said, I've never been a fan of hers, and she's not very talented. But I'll tell you, what she said the other day about that young man is disgraceful. She should be forced to resign. And Rachel Maddow should be forced to resign. Nobody watches her anyway. I don't know if it's not possible they pay her as much money as I hear. But certainly she's lost all credibility, both of them. But what they said the other day, they should be forced to resign about that young person who is suffering great.
Wow. We have the Natalie Winters segment here teed up by the President of the United States. Natalie, joining us from the White House. I want to talk first about Perkins Coie. You have followed this firm, the firm originally of Mark Elias. Tell us about it. Put in perspective what they've actually done and why what the President of the United States did today was bold, beautiful, and dead spot on, man.
Well, I would also add retribution in there in terms of how you want to describe it, right? We're fighting lawfare with lawfare. But the framing of it as retribution, you know, we always reject here in the war room. It's justice, it's accountability. But this is one of the firms, not just because of their very, very close partner-level affiliations with Mark Elias, who's now obviously at Democracy Docket and one of the leading voices and activists on all things, they say, election integrity. We know in reality that means election rigging, but they also played an integral role in terms of the Hillary Clinton campaign, the Steele dossier, Fusion GPS, allowing that campaign to spy on President Trump, creating the Russia collusion hoax, right? They're not a law firm. Just like all these judges that are trying to interrupt and sabotage President Trump's agenda, they're activists masquerading as such. And I think executive orders like these, I think, sort of play into the brilliance of President Trump, which is he sort of unmasks, right? Just the absurdity, I guess you could call it, of the deep state, but just of how this city operates. So what do I mean by that? He's so wonderful at unmasking the bias of the mainstream media, the bias of elections, the bias of even things like presidential debate commissions. But I think with his revocation of security clearances, not just for law firms like Perkins Coie, but also, remember, what was it just a few weeks ago, revoking security clearances for people like Mark Zaid and Norm Eisen, really makes you wonder why in the heck these people had them to begin with, sort of in the same way as to why so many of these, DC-based NGOs were receiving such hefty, high-dollar contracts for work that really could only be at best described as euphemistic ways of sabotaging the populist movement, and at worst, just a straight-up racket. So Victoria Nuland and her family can buy their third or fourth home.
You know, the other reason it's also so bold is this city's run by law firms, particularly powerful firms. There's a book, I think, by Evan Thomas years ago called The Man to See. It was about Edward Bennett Williams, who one time owned the Washington Redskins, I believe, but he was the power lawyer in town, just like Bob Strauss was. This was Bob Bauer was the senior partner, or I think one of the senior partners of Perkins Coie that Elias reported to. Their political operation, like you said, it wasn't a law firm. It was essentially a massive political operation for the Democratic Party. And if you look at everything from Russiagate, they've got their hands in everything. President Trump really went to war with the big Washington law firms, and not just Perkins Coie, which is the first, but in not revoking their security clearance. But he implied he's going to be doing a lot more, Natalie.
Well, they're not law firms, right? They're effectively lobbying firms. And if you look at the clients that they've had, oftentimes, right, they're foreign governments. Oftentimes it's the Chinese Communist Party. And I think when you look, if you want to link this, for example, to what was it earlier today, all those, Chinese Communist Party linked, if not employed hackers being indicted for trying to steal and hack into inboxes of high-level American officials. I think if you really get to the bottom of why so many Chinese Communist Party linked entities want to hire and retain, right, domestic or here Western law firms that really are just a stone's throw away from me right now, it's because of these security clearances, right? It's very nefarious. And frankly, I think if you broaden it out, right, think about all these law firms that refused to work or dropped President Trump during the 2020 election years, right? These are clearly partisan actors. I don't understand why they have security clearances in the first place to begin with, but I think today is a day where you really come to appreciate, frankly, what I guess we'll call the interregnum period, right? The 2020 to 2024 stolen election years, because President Trump and this whole movement, we were able to see who our enemies actually were, and make no mistake, still are. But I think it gave us the ability to pursue EOs like this, revocations of security clearances like this, because this really gets to the heart of it, right? So much of DOGE is about, cutting off the heads. I guess it's a Hydra head of the deep state from the government perspective, but it's a very corporatist, right, kind of public-private fusion partnership, right, where they sort of carry out or they offsource the stuff that impinges, whether it's the censorship stuff, you name it, to corporations, or in this case, the law firms. And I think today, really, I know we aren't allowed to say retribution, but it's a wonderful day for justice and accountability.
Very much so. Also, a wonderful day for your interview with DJ Daniels his entire time at the White House and the State of the Union. Yes. Very touching, great young man. But President Trump, Nicole Wallace, we talked about that yesterday, Rachel Maddow. Give me your assessment of President Trump actually singling out those two and going after him, and particularly Nicole Wallace's, who's kind of the new superstar there, her comments about DJ.
Well, let's be clear, because MSNBC loves to, I would say mansplain, but I guess maybe they-them-splain to this audience that what we're seeing from President Trump is not what we voted for. And what the American people voted for was for President Trump, after signing EOs whereby he's revoking deep state law firms' security clearances, he then starts dunking on Nicole Wallace and Rachel Maddow. That is precisely what I voted for, right? Not just because of the disgusting comments that were made yesterday towards DJ Dan. It's only a matter of time before I probably get kicked off the White House lawn, but I'll take it. But it's true. It's absolute depravity from these people. And you know what, Steve? For so long, these people have gotten away with it, right? They walk around because they're like members of the White House Correspondents Association. I see it firsthand. They have an air of superiority. It's pseudo-intellectualism. The whole time while I was sitting in the briefing room watching the State of the Union, the people behind me were talking about how they were live fact-checking President Trump. And I'm sorry, not to sound reductive, but the mainstream media, the legacy media, absolutely sucks. And it's a mask-off moment when they start attacking 13-year-old survivors of brain cancer. And frankly, Steve, it shows you how desperate they are, because it harkens back to the 2016 resistance-era tactics, which they pledged, and they had multi-million-dollar meetings saying they weren't going to engage in those tactics because they know how off-putting they are. But they're scrambling because they have absolutely nothing to go for. Because you know what? President Trump's agenda is extremely popular. And maybe they're shooting right into their veins the, 76% approval rating of President Trump's State of the Union address. But it just shows you how freaking out they are. I guess all their pals up at Perkins Coie have now lost their security clearance. So foreign governments aren't going to want to hire them to spy and hack the American people. But I guess it's a tough day when you've been, lying to this country for decades. You lose your security clearance, you melt down, and you get called out in the Oval Office, as you should be.
And that, young lady, is what we voted for. What's your social media? Natalie Winters, what's your social media until tomorrow? What's your social media?
Natalie G. Winters on all platforms. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Go inside, get warm. Natalie Winters from the White House.